Coming in, to follow on from Claire, how long is that three payment piece?
So Barry helped me out here, I think, if I get this wrong, but I mean, it's an initial 2.5, and then at the end of the premium period, you'll get...
What do you mean by the end of the premium period?
So there'll be people who still have premiums coming to them under the Ash Dieback scheme.
If the game was up on them.
Yeah, so if they're out of premium, yeah, Barry, please.
Hi, Deputy. So in terms of, there's a first upfront payment. Anyone who's gone through the scheme and has cleared and replanted, they can get the 2,500 at that point. And then at year 4, so when you've planted those trees and you get your second grant payment from us, or your third grant payment from us, at that point then you get €1,250 and €1,250 the year after. That's how it's been structured.
So you have to wait 4 or 5 years, is it? Even at best, the quickest to be at best 4 or 5 years.
So year 1, 2,500. Year 4, 1,250.
And then if you have premiums, have you planned again before? Could some people be 7 or 8 years? That's what I'm asking.
But those who have premium, and not to complicate the discussion, but those who have premium are going to receive a top-up payment on the difference. They're currently receiving an average payment of about €500 a hectare.
I'm dealing with the 5,000 now. Just stay on the 5,000, okay. The way I understand it. Right, we've looked at scenario of the person that is replanting now, right? So they'll get 2,500 and they'll get 1,250 and 1,250 in 4 years' time. Is it in 5 years' time? Is that right?
Yeah.
Right. So that's 5 years of a between the thing. If I have 3 years left, have I to get? Do I get 2,500 now, or when do I get the 2,500? And do I have to have planted and 4 years after that before I get the other 2,500?
So you receive your 2.5 as soon as you've cleared and planted immediately, whether you have premium or not. That's immediate, and then you receive the other 2,500 in the 2 subsequent years at the end of your premium cycle. So whether that's year 4, 5, or 6. So, I mean, the reality is there's about 5,500 hectares of people left with premium, running up to about 2034.
Okay, all right. It's different than I had read it at the beginning. I thought that you were going to get 5,000 to a lump sum, but the devil is always in the detail. Brendan, you talked there about 1.3 billion over a 5-year period. How do you come to that figure?
Well, I was very careful with my language, actually, Deputy. Yeah. So I said 1.3 billion in commitments. So that includes 20 years.
So tell me how we'll spend it over the 5-year period.
No, I didn't say it would be spent over the 5-year period. I didn't. That's why I was very careful in what I said. But I thought I was clear.
Sounded good though.
No, but I thought I was clear. So it's 1.3 billion in commitments.
There's 300 million, am I correct in saying, for afforestation? And the rest is going to be over a 20-year period, is that correct?
Yeah.
So it's over 20 years, that figures.
They're the commitments,
yeah. Well,
that's why I said it the way I said it.
Right. You talked about the hectare payment for sowing. There's none of the, you said for any farmer, absolutely no peat soil no peat soil. You can sow that on. Isn't that correct? The minister said it.
Well, I don't think that's correct. And
well, the minister said it. I'm quoting the minister.
Listen. I'm not sure what the minister said. So, and maybe what I say might be technically incorrect. But I think the difficulty is with peat soils over 30 centimetres deep.
No. I'm talking about the hectare.
Sorry, the native tree scheme.
Yeah.
Okay. So apologies. I misunderstood the question. Yeah.
So am I right?
Well, I'm going to ask Barry to answer that.
Yeah.
So as part of the approval for the native tree area scheme, because you plant without a licence, you just go through a scheme approval. So in effect, it's red, green. You put in your submission. The various layers are put in terms of peat and hen harrier and freshwater pearl mussel and high nature value. And on the basis of that, then we can issue the approval. For those you can plant on peat and you can plant native species on peat. You just have to come through the Forest Type 1 application. So you'd have to come through.
You have to go through the process. You cannot plant without a licence.
For the native tree area scheme, exactly.
Okay.
Right.
How many?
On peat.
So I'm correct. What is it? Barry, how many of them applications has been passed?
We've about 250 hectares of approvals under the Native Tree Area Scheme.
Okay.
And we've just made some changes to it as well to make it more attractive in terms of there were some issues around the planting of corners of fields and how that was calculated, and in terms of certain water courses in terms of the Native Tree Area Scheme
That's since
2, which is
when?
the riparian.
Is that included in the dashboard we get?
Yes, it is. It's included on the
overall figure.
Not in the overall figure, no, it's included just down here in this table at the bottom. It's not in the overall A4 figure.
Okay. Am I correct in saying that since September, since the new scheme, the amount of licences you've given out is about 1,900 hectares?
So in terms of...
From September?
From September, it's about 2,000 hectares.
Yeah, right.
And then in addition to that, Deputy, you have to look at the fact that there is another over 1,000 hectares of people who had licences and they've opted into the new programme to get the better financial approach. So that doesn't really appear in the dashboard. So in total, we've about 3,500 hectares approved since the opening of the programme.
Right. You stated to us when we were in the AV room when we had a meeting last summer that there was something like, 7,000 hectares or something kicking around for 4 or 5 years of licences that was being dealt with. We're talking about another 2,000 here. The facts are, since January, 392 hectares has been planted. Is that correct?
So, yes, and of course the way that's clarified is where someone has fully planted and gone through the financial approval and got their payment, what we call it a Form 2 payment, we then list that as planted.
The same as every other year that we saw the dashboard.
But just in terms of what I flagged earlier on, off the licences we've approved, 1,590 hectares have indicated they're proceeding with planting. And there's, off that 3,500 hectares that are there.
Okay, all right.
And just in terms of the 7,000 hectares I'd spoken about in the previous programme, about 2,000 hectares of those went through the de minimis scheme. If you recall, we had a scheme trying to bridge the gap between the old programme and the new programme, and then so that was 2,000 off the 5,000, and then the other 3,500 have opted into this new programme. So we can see there is some demand for those who had their licences to.
What do you think you'll get planted this year? Tell me, we have this department since 2020 to the end of last year hasn't achieved 1 year of our targets. Now that's a damning statement for any department. 1 year is 8,000 hectares. It hasn't achieved that from 2020 to 2024, be it for all different reasons. New legislation was brought in, I understand all that. But down the road, the devil will bite us in the backside because we won't have planted what we were supposed to plant in 20 years' time. We won't have the offset in our regard of what we need. What is your figure this year that you think will be planted? Will we reach 8,000 with all the figures of 5,000, 2,000?
So, Deputy, the Department of Agriculture, Food and Marine doesn't plant trees.
I know that.
So, the level of planting depends entirely on the demand for the scheme. And so we've created a scheme now that we think is attractive, but it's in its infancy. So if you're asking me, do I think we'll plant 8,000 hectares of trees this year, I'd say it's extremely unlikely, unless there's an explosion.
What would you expect?
Well, in our licensing plan, but the licensing plan, I must say I have a slight difficulty with it. The licensing plan says 4,200 hectares. That's what's in the licensing plan. But that depends on individual landowners and farmers deciding that they want to apply. So that's where we are. So, I mean, there's a target there. It's important to have an ambitious target for the sector going forward. If we didn't have ambitious targets, I would imagine we'd be criticised for that.
Would you be worried at the moment if we're, and I understand that it's paid stuff, but we watch it and this committee has dealt with it, we have watched it every year. We're in April, we're going into May, quarter of the year, maybe another month, it's plant, and you won't be planting in June and July, or August for that matter. Would you be worried that there's only 392 coming in at the moment? And would you be worried that we wouldn't increase on last year?
Well, I worry about everything, Deputy. And
Oh, I know, yeah, you might, but this is figures.
And I think I said in my opening answer that we weren't getting enough applications in, and I think that's.
Yeah, but can I tell you why, Brendan? Why you're not getting enough applicants in? Because first of all, since 2019 or 18 or 20, what went on, farmers were waiting and waiting and waiting. And they went into loss at the time, and they went into other schemes, right? Because they could see money coming, not being waiting for the postman to come with something. And I understand that there was some of that was challenges or whatever. And you spoke there about a review. Now, I've done a review on the Habitats Directive, and I was well off. I went home counting cattle because I spent a full day on you might get a better review, I don't know. But I done a review on that with all the different countries in Europe, and nothing came out of it. But the facts are that until they change the environmental things, farmers won't be planting. Get that into your head. For the simple reason, 30 centimetres is going to get rid of a heap of land. You're going to a higher quality of land in that a tillage person is looking for, that a dairy person is looking for because of the derogation. You know this, you're overall the department, Brendan, that a derogation farmer is looking for. The bullock has gone up now, they'll need a bit more land. The tillage person is looking for it. You have such a pressure on land that anyone that thinks that you're going to increase them figures, I think is absolutely without dropping some of the environmental measures that's on it. And is democracy gone? That if there was a different Europe in the next election or whatever, I saw this year they were able to change parts of the cap or the BIS or the cap, whatever you want to call it. The cap, yeah. They were able to do it because farmers start protesting in different countries. Wouldn't be 10 hectares, wouldn't be, I think they should have reduced the paperwork an awful lot more for farmers right up along with it. But I'm being honest here. When you talk to farmers on the ground, with what went on over the last number of years in the department, they have no faith in it, first of all. You talk about educating them. Farmers know about the trees. They know about the acre or the hectare. I'll give you an example. Most of the west of Ireland, where you'd plant a lot of trees, there'd be a bit of peaty stuff. It's not going to happen because you cannot do it. You have to go through all the rigours again. And I think you need to switch out of the sort of the hopeful zone and it's year in. We're 4 years coming in here now, and we're hearing the same story about forestry. And I understand fully that you cannot plant the trees, not a hope, and you can only give licenses. But it's such a poison thing at the moment, forestry, with what went on with the people. I saw Tim. I used a chainsaw in Glenhesh below in Mayo, right? And I cut the fine one time ago when the first timber machines came out, you had to brash it up for the first 6 foot. And the finest of timber came out of there. Today, you cannot plant a tree in it because of environmental regulations. And what we have done, we have dropped down the areas that we can plant on. And the chairman has brought it up several times, and everyone here. And we have left it that they're competing for ground that others want. And not a hope in hell. The last, and I'd like to know your comment on that, and that's coming from the ground, from, let's be honest. I'm not saying it's your fault, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that it's a major problem coming down the line. And the last question I want to know is, the thing about carbon credits. The farmer owns the forestry. Does the farmer own the carbon credits that'll be on that, or who's going to keep taking the benefit of them?
Okay. So, can I deal with the first bit first? Yeah. That was a very wide-ranging kind of statement you made. So, I'm not sure I'm going to get into the political stuff and democracy in Europe and all that sort of thing. Yeah. But look, and I'm also trying to be straight up here. Yeah. Okay. So, I come in here and I have to present the facts. Okay. And I can't deal in aspirations or how things might be or should be in different circumstances. So we have state aid rules in the European Union, and state aid rules are necessary for the protection of the single market. They mean everybody's playing a level playing field across Europe. And Ireland, by a country mile, is the biggest beneficiary of the single market. Agriculture in Ireland would be dead without the single market. okay? It wouldn't be dead without the cap, because it would survive in some way. But without the single market, it'd be dead, okay? So state aid rules are there for the protection of the single market. We provide grants to people to plant trees, and therefore we need state aid approval. And the conditions that are part of the new package were part of the conditionality for the state aid approval of the Irish Forestry Programme. So that's the way it is. Now, you can argue about the merits of that. You can argue about what it does to the complexity of the licensing process.
Chair, can I ask a quick one question on that? It's related, same as going back again later.
Yeah.
Just
sure.
in passing, sorry.
Yeah.
Brenda, but when you're on that conditionality that came
Yeah.
for environmental reasons when we went out looking for the state aid.
Yeah.
The recent announcement by the EPA that our peatland is now emitting 60% less.
60% less.
Would that have a bearing on the conditionality that came back if it was the original EPA figures that our European colleagues and friends that set the conditionality were using? Just as a question in passing when you're on that, you're on that area.
So honestly, I mean, Deputy Fitzmaurice probably knows about peat emissions more than I do. So I can't answer that question. But what I can say is that we went through a tortuous process, and it was tortuous. Firstly with DG Comp, who are the competent authority for state aid approvals. And they do an inter-service consultation, and the inter-service consultation went to DG Environment. And, you know, we went through, I mean, I can't say how many meetings and exchanges we went through with DG Environment. And eventually we came out with an approval that had this conditionality attached to it. Now, from their perspective, this is the minimum required to make sure that Irish forestry meets all of the relevant environmental conditionality. That's their perspective. We have a commercial sector here who might say, well, this is a complication in the way of producing commercial forestry. But so I'm aware that there's a Teagasc report on emissions from peatland. I don't believe it has to do, I mean, I think, Deputy, that relates to the assumption that peatland under agricultural use was completely drained. And I think the Teagasc analysis said that. In fact, some of these drains haven't been cleared for quite a number of years, and therefore the emissions from those lands are less than we might have anticipated. But I don't think that would have changed the argument on forestry. But obviously, when this thing is reviewed in 2025, it's something we'll consider. But I would just again caution that it's the Commission that wanted this review in 2025, and they want to make sure we're meeting all these environmental requirements. So, like, I don't want to give the idea that we can go in, review this, and we'll come out with something that's much easier. That's not the way things are viewed in DG Envy, and we'll have to go through that inter-service consultation again. So look, Deputy Fitzmaurice, I absolutely accept your sincerity and your view, 100%. But I can't come in here and talk about aspiration. I have to come in and talk about the facts as I know them to be. And the facts are that we went through a tortuous process to get this thing approved. And we come out with a very generous package, I think, but it comes with conditions attached. And that's what we're going to have to...
Yes, to finish the last question.
Yeah.
There was another question.
Oh, yeah.
I went on...
Yeah. So there's a long section in here in my brief that deals with this, and I'm not going to read it. But, like, so the state doesn't claim to own carbon credits. And because this is a complex thing, okay, and I could read 3 pages here, Deputy, and you'd think I was talking nonsense. So, I mean, we don't have a system of carbon farming in this country yet, and there's a system being developed. And that will have to establish some kind of a framework for certifying emissions reduction and carbon credits for people. And it will also have to determine how they're traded. Now, from the state's point of view, what's critically important is that when we're talking about emissions reduction nationally, that we can count emissions that take place on this island. They have to be counted here. That doesn't mean a farmer can't use it if a company wants to pay him something for ESG or for some other benefit. that's up to him to do. But what we have to make sure is that if there is emissions reduction from forestry, that we can count it into the overall national emissions reduction. So it's not a question of ownership, it's a question of how we account for this. So maybe that's not a satisfactory answer, but there are things we have to figure out, and there is a carbon farming framework being developed at European Union level, and it's complicated stuff. But the question of ownership, the state does not claim it owns carbon credits. The state will not be trading carbon credits from forestry, but we need to be able to count carbon reductions in our inventory so that we can say overall the state has reduced emissions by X. So we need to be able to do that.